Hey, random internet person, and welcome back to Set Us Up, Build Your Own NAS. This is episode number 2. In the first episode, we went over the hardware and software requirements for building your own NAS. We downloaded the operating system and we installed it. So in this episode, we're going to install patches for the OS, make additional configuration settings, and we'll set up our first Windows share. So let's start that now. So now let's log in as our user that we created during the install. And we'll check our mount points. As we can see, we've got the boot SDA1. We've got the root on SDA2. And we have our NAS on dev mapper NAS, which is the way an LVM looks. And you can see that the NAS has 1 terabyte of storage. If we go into NAS, there's nothing there. So the first thing we want to do is get OS patches. So the way we do that is we run sudo, which means we're going to run as root, and we use the command yum, which is the package manager for CentOS, and I'm going to tell it to update. The -y means to automatically default yes on any questions. And this is the first time I've run sudo, and it's asking me the Peter Parker question: with great power comes great responsibility. I think I can handle it, so I'm going to put my password in again. Okay, and we'll let yum run. Okay, we're done. I noticed that it did download and install a new kernel, so a reboot will be required. But before we do that, there's a couple things I want to do. First is we're going to turn off SE Linux. SE Linux is a enhanced security package for Linux, but for our purposes, we don't need it. So to do that, we need to edit a config file. Now the default editor that comes with Linux is VI, and it's the old standard, but it is old, so I think I shall download a new one. I like to use Nano, so I'm going to use yum again to download and install it. So we're going to give it the sudo yum-y install nano. Done. So now I'm going to use sudo again and use nano to edit the SE Linux config file. And as you can see on this line, it is enforcing. And what I'm going to do is disable. Hit Control O to write the file and Control X to exit. Now changing this requires a reboot anyways, so we would have to reboot even if yum did not install a new kernel. One last thing I want to do is disable the firewall. So we will do that with the following command, again with sudo. I'm going to stop the firewall. The firewall that comes with CentOS version 7 is called Firewall D. And the reason I'm not using a firewall is because my router is my firewall. So I'm not worried about anyone getting in. This NAS device is not directly connected to the internet. And one last thing, I need to disable the firewall so it does not start back up on the reboot. Okay, we're done, and I will issue a reboot command. And we're back. Let's log in as my user again. Okay, now we're going to create a Windows share on our Linux server so that our Windows workstation can write files to that 1 terabyte drive. So how do we do that? Well, we have to download some other software packages. So we're going to use Yum. And the software package that provides Windows file sharing on a Linux system is called Samba. So we're going to install Samba. We also need the Samba client and a package called Samba Common. So let's sudo's asking for a password, so we'll put that in, and we'll let Yum download everything it needs to run Samba. Done. So next we need to set up the share. So let's go to our NAS. So this is our 1 terabyte drive and we have nothing on it. So let's create a folder that we will share. So in this case, I'm going to use sudo, make a directory called storage. We can name it anything, it doesn't really matter. So now we have a directory called storage. Notice that the directory is owned by root, and this isn't going to work for our Windows share. The initial share we're going to set up is going to have anonymous access, meaning that any user can get to it. In another video, I will show you how to set up user access, where you can restrict by user who can access Windows shares. But like I said, we're going to set up anonymous access, so the owner root has full access and the group root has read and execute and others have read and execute. That's going to work fine for us, but we do need to change the owner from root to nobody. And if we look at, we see that nobody now owns this folder. Okay, so now we need to configure Samba. So Samba configuration is stored in etc Samba. And you can see the smb.conf is the configuration file. So let's make a backup of that just in case. And now we're going to edit it. And notice I'm having to use sudo on every one of these commands, and that's because in the etc folder only root has access to make changes. Okay, here's our default smb.conf. You notice it sets up some printers and some other stuff. It shares the home directories. We're going to be getting rid of most of this. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to change the work group. And the default work group for Windows is called Workgroup, and that's what my Windows computer is set up for, so we'll set that. Let's see, the next lines about printing we're going to get rid of. Control K and Nano deletes the line. So we're done with that. We're going to get rid of the homes because we're not going to share the homes. And again, I'm not sharing any printer, so we'll get rid of all of that. Now let's add some lines. The first line I'm going to add is to set the NetBIOS name to NAS. This is the name that we can use to get to from Windows. I'm also going to add the line called map to guest. This sets up the anonymous access. Now to set up the share. So we're going to call the share storage. Again, you can name it whatever you want. The name that's in these brackets right here will be the name that is shown in the Windows File Explorer. We're going to add a comment. Again, the comment can be whatever you want. It will show up in Windows. Now we have to give the path, and this is the path on our Linux device. We're going to set it as browsable. We're going to set it to writable. We're going to turn on anonymous and set read only to no. Some of these are may be redundant, but I guess I like to be thorough. We're going to write the file, and then we're going to run a command called test_parm that will parse the file and tell us if there's any issues. And as we see here, it is saying that loaded services file okay, processing section storage, everything was okay, so we'll hit enter, and this is our file. Notice that we only needed guest okay and read only. So let's look at our file again. This time we can use the cat command. Cat will spit out the contents of a file. We don't need root access. So there's our file. I didn't change anything, but we could make our file look like what test_parm printed out, but it's okay. We don't have to worry about that. All right. So the next thing we need to do is enable and start the Samba service. The Samba service consists of two different programs, SMB and NMB. So let's do that. System control is the program that controls services on Linux. So we're going to enable SMB, and we're going to enable NMB, and now we're going to start SMB, and we're going to start NMB. Now that's it. We can now switch over to our Windows machine and see if the share is there. And we'll do that right now. Okay, we're on our Windows machine, so let's do some basic testing. First thing we'll do is see if we can ping the NAS device. Pinging is just a basic network test. So we're going to ping the IP address 192.168.1.200, and we're getting replies. So basic network connectivity is there. So let's open up File Explorer. And let's see, we're going to have to go to 192.168.1.200. And it should show us the file share storage. There it is. Double click in it. File is empty. Let's see if we can create a file. I'm going to create a text document saying this test worked great. There we go. Our first file has been stored on our NAS device. So we now have 1 terabyte available to our Windows machine. We can map a drive letter to it. We can do whatever we want. Now, at this point, we could shut down our NAS device and move it to its final resting location, get rid of the monitor and the keyboard, and make it headless. So you may be asking, well, how do we access it if we need to? Well, we can use Secure Shell. And Secure Shell is an encrypted connection that provides a terminal access to whatever Linux box or any other operating system really that supports Secure Shell. And on Windows, for a client, I use PuTTY. PuTTY has been around for a very long time, and it works great. There's plenty of configuration. You can change colors, font. You can set up tunnels. You can put in authentication. No worries. So in this case, I've already got a session called NAS setup. It's pointed to the 192.168.1.200 IP address, and the port is 22. I haven't changed that, and the connection type is SSH. So let's open. Notice we get this warning here that the host key doesn't match. So we're going to hit yes, that we know who we're connecting to. We only get this the first time. And we get a login screen. So we're going to log in as our user. We'll put in our password. And see, we're logged into the NAS. And this is how we're going to configure the NAS device from now on. So let's, first thing we'll do, let's go see if that file is there. So let's cd NAS. Oops, And as you can see, we have the storage folder. We go into storage. If we look at files, there's the file. This test worked great. Notice that the nobody account owns this file, which means it's anonymous. And that's exactly what we wanted. And notice if I create a file on the NAS itself, let's call it well, we're going to have to use quotes here. So I have to use sudo. There we go. And notice that showed up. Of course, there's nothing in it, but we look. Notice that the owner of that file is root. So if we go to our Windows machine and we try to open it and add some text and save it, it's not going to let us save it because we only have anonymous access, and this is not owned by nobody. It's owned by root. So we can't do that. So it's one thing to be conscious of if you're actually going to be creating files directly on the NAS, that you will have to make sure that your user and group is set up correctly. So in this case, we can change the owner to nobody, if I can spell, of okay. Look at our folder. Looks good now. Notice on Windows you don't notice anything changing, but if we open up the text file and we make some changes to it, boom, no problem. And if we look at it on our Windows device, there you see the data that we just put into it. So that's a basic Windows share on our NAS device. So what we'll do for the next video is we're going to set up the media center. This is going to be using software called Plex, and it will be using this 1 terabyte storage to put some music, some movies on. It's a very nice package, very easy to use, and I will show you how to get it installed. So if you like what you saw here and want to see more, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell to get notified for more videos. You can post any questions or comments below, and check out the Twitter account @SetUsUpChannel. Thanks for taking the time for watching, and I'll see you later.